Just a mistake. So thanks for being on the panel. This is week 12 of Real Life Librarianship. And as I was saying to Ann Hokinson earlier, these are really delightful. Not only do we learn a whole lot about individual librarians, which is partly what this is about, to learn how people get where they are today, but also we learn a whole lot about libraries. And we have a bunch of regular listeners, which is really fun too. And all the attendees are invited to ask questions. You can either use the Q&A or you can put them in chat, and then I'll ask the questions as they come up. But if we get started, the first is to introduce each of yourselves. So introduce yourself, tell us what your current job title is and where you work, and then give a quick description of your library system. This one is system directors. And in Minnesota, we know there are 3 different types of library systems, 2 different types of public library systems, and then the multi-county, multi-type systems. So I think we'll begin with Liz.
Okay. Hi, I'm Liz Lynch, and I am the Executive Director of the Lake Agassiz Regional Library System. And we are headquartered out of Moorhead, and the headquarters for the Lake Agassiz Regional Library System is actually housed in the lower level of the Moorhead Public Library. And our library system provides library service to a 7-county service area. Moorhead is the biggest community that we serve. Beyond that, it's a pretty rural region. And we provide library service in 22 communities. And did I mention we're a consolidated library system?
No, but that's kind of important. And tell us what a consolidated system actually is.
So, a consolidated library system means that even though we have 22 locations, we kind of consider ourselves one library. So we're one library with several branches. And what that means is that we have one operating budget for the entire region. We have our headquarters, which with administrative staff who are specialists in particular areas. So we have somebody, for instance, who does all the ordering and selecting and whatever of all of our materials for the entire region. We have HR person and finance director that takes care of everything finance for the whole region. We have one marketing person that takes care of all the marketing for the whole region, and IT staff here that take care of everything IT across the region. But also beyond that, we have one set of policies and procedures for the entire region. And what else? One budget, one set of policies. Liz, a lot of the work happens behind the scenes. So that the idea is that we have all these experts in the headquarters so that the people who are working the front lines in our locations, they only have to worry about serving that person in their community and how to best serve their community. Does that make sense?
See, Liz, then, is somebody who's working in a branch library, then are they a city employee?
Nope. Everyone is an employee of Lake Agassiz Regional Library. Mm-hmm. Yep, you get your paycheck and it says Lake Agassiz Regional Library on it. And yeah, we're our own government entity. Oh, Anne, you're muted.
Sorry, I was typing. Let's go to Ann Hokinson because her system is a federated public library system, which is different.
Yep. So I'm Ann Hokinson, and I'm the Executive Director of Traverse de Sioux Regional Library System, and our headquarters is Mankato. We have 9 counties in the southern part of the state, and we are a federated library system, which means that our regional system office has its budget, and the people who work in that office all work for the system, like I do. But our members are all of the public libraries in the 9 counties, and they do not work for the regional system. They are sometimes county employees, sometimes city employees, and in one instance, they might be the employee of a library system. The Waseca-LeSueur County Library System is its own government entity. So very different structure. That means that anything that we want to do collaboratively, it has to be developed with everyone in mind, with a lot of buy-in and a lot of voting, because we can't just have an administrative group make decisions and then tell everyone that that's the way it's going to be. So we provide services is how we talk about it. We provide services to our public libraries. We run the automation system, the ILS, delivery, and we do centralized cataloging. And we also do a lot with telecom. So all of the E-rate things, and then just generally making the computer systems work. We're a very rural system outside of the Mankato area. So a lot of those smaller communities don't really have a computer expert locally, and get their computer support through us. And that's changed over time. We do less of that. We also are different in that we are simultaneously, this name is the same, but we are also a multi-county, multi-type system. So that means that we also have members who are school and academic and theoretically special libraries. We have a few historical society libraries, but frankly, they're not very active in our membership. They're pretty small organizations. And so then we get funding from the state for those two things, the public library side and the multi-type side. And then we get ACHF funding, which we manage, and we get the telecom aid, which we manage. And then we also charge fees. So we then charge back some of the cost of providing those services to our member libraries, and they write us a check twice a year.
So the one you mentioned, an acronym for funding, was that legacy funding?
Yes, ACHF, the public systems all get arts and cultural heritage funding, and then they manage that in different ways. How we do that is with a re-grant program. Each of the member libraries can apply for that funding.
Okay, good. So now we know the difference between consolidated and federated. And I probably should have mentioned that there's a fourth type of library system, and that's those hybrid systems like TDS, where it's multi-type and regional public library system. And there are a couple others of those in Minnesota too. Arrowhead and Selco kind of operate that way. But Mary Jordan, who is next on our agenda here, is the director of a traditional multi-type library system. So tell us about that, Mary.
So it's, of course, the most wonderful possible job you could have. So our library system, we cover every type of library across the central part of the state. We have 12 counties. It's 300-ish libraries, and about 200-ish of those are school libraries. So since we don't have a defined set of tasks like Liz and Anne have talked about, our kind of mission was a little bit more open. And what our mission though has been is to provide some support and training to those libraries. So we don't fund them. We don't catalog for them. We don't do things like that, but we do try to come in and help them with like issues that they might be having, and how does your library work, or I'm new here, what do I do next, or I'd really like to have a grant for to bring in some books or materials, or to bring in an author. Can you help me find that? And so we do a lot of kind of administrative style support like that. And then we also try to do training that'll be necessary and useful to all of our types of libraries. So yeah, it's pretty interesting because, especially, well, back in the before times when we got to go places. I could go and, visit a couple of school libraries in the morning and then hang out at a university library in the afternoon, and then go to an event at the History Center Library in the evening. And it's one of the things that I have definitely taken from this job is I've been a librarian for more than 20 years in a lot of different libraries, and we all pretty much do the same thing. And we all call it different things, and that's different important focuses of service, but libraries are kind of libraries, and it's been really interesting to see how our community is growing and developing.
And just as an added point, Metronet also, of course, is a multi-county, multi-type, but our funding comes directly from the state of Minnesota too, through the Department of Education. We're eligible to apply for just about any kind of grant, LSTA or whatever other resources we can identify. So that in Minnesota, the 3/4 types of library systems are funded through the state of Minnesota. And we could debate, but we're not going to, the adequacy of that funding, because I will remind all of our attendees that this is Virtual Library Legislative Week. And if you have not reached out to your elected representatives in the House and Senate in Minnesota, please do. And there's plenty of information online at the Library Advocacy website to get you started on that. Somebody put that right in there to add Stacy. She's always on top of things. Put the advocacy website in there. So systems are funded different. The regional public library systems have one formula for funding. The multi-types have a separate formula for funding. We could make this as complicated as we want, but we'll just say the funding comes from the state. And there was a question earlier for Liz that she answered in the chat about what are the titles of the various locations. Are they library directors or are they called branch managers? And in Lake Agassiz, they're called branch librarians, not library directors, which is interesting. I think that changes too sometimes from system to system. So.
Can I mention one thing, Ann?
Sure.
I didn't talk about our funding at all. And as a member of the Council of Regional Public Library System Administrators, it's so interesting to talk to the other regional library directors to find out how they're funded, because none of us are funded in the same way. It's just, I cannot even believe it. But we rely heavily on funding from our counties and cities, right. And our state funding is actually just a fraction of what we operate on.
That's good to know. And I do know that and could have brought that up as well. But I think that's a good point, that local public library systems in a lot of cases receive significant local funding so that those buildings in those local communities are well supported by their communities.
I was also just going to throw out there too that for anybody, I mean, I think most of us on the panel have also worked in other states doing this and similar work, and other states are organized very differently. I think this is the only state that I have worked in that it is so different across all the systems. So you may be, if you go to another state and want to be a systems librarian, they may be more similar, but they would do the same kinds of things as all four of us would do.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are certain administrative tasks that I think happen at the system level, but Mary makes a very good point about other states. I mean, Wisconsin is very different. Iowa is very different. And maybe we'll hear some of that as we move on, because now we really want to hear about you and your library careers. And, you know, where did you go to library school, and what is an overview of the path that you took before you ended up in these system director positions? We'd begin with Mary, but I know Mary has a long checkered past. So let's begin with Mary and hear what she has to say. Because for one thing, Mary really likes to go to school.
Maybe a little too much, and I don't recommend this. Yeah, I will be concise. So when I was a very young person, I wanted to, as I think so many young people do, I wanted to save the world and do good things. And so I went to law school because I thought that would be a good idea. No, that was not a good idea. You do not save the world. You very rarely do good things. It's not the path to goodness. And my mom had been a librarian, and I had always I would cut school and spend the day sitting in the public library. Thank you to all the public librarians who never turned me in. uh, and everybody always said, "Oh, well, you like to read books. You should be a librarian." And I kept saying, "How boring! Who would do that?" Blah. Until the day I was in a particularly messy divorce case, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should do this. And so I very brazenly walked into the admissions department at Milwaukee. And I said, hey, look, I have a checkbook and I know you start your fall semester in 2 weeks and I definitely want to be there. So what is this going to take? How much? Let's make this happen. And they could not have been nicer to me. They could not have been more helpful. And the first day I walked into class, I was like, this is it. This is what I've always wanted. And I always said my mother has been very nice about not telling me more than, once a week or so. I told you so. I told you so. So I had a lot of different thoughts that I wanted to do, of things that I wanted to do when I got out of school. And I thought I might want to be a traveling cataloger. And I thought I might want to, I wanted to be a business librarian briefly. I wanted to be an archivist briefly. And then when job time came around, I decided employed was what I wanted to be, and health insurance. So I did that. And my first job was as a public library director. Another thing that I don't necessarily recommend for your first job out of library school is running the place. It was an extremely educational place for me to be, in that everything was so terrible that literally every day the building didn't burn down was great. It was our best day. Yeah, I have a lot of terrifying stories there, but I'll save them. They're for later. But I really enjoyed public libraries. I really enjoyed doing that. So I went on to another public library and I did more work, and I got involved with a lot of library organizations, and I kept saying, but why aren't we better at leading? Libraries are so important, so valuable. We do so many good things for the community. We don't have people necessarily who are great at leading and great at doing things. And I will say, I started in Illinois, and I was very, very fortunate there that there was so much good training, and I got to go to so much good leadership training, and I was the most fortunate you could be, and I was still disappointed. And I kept kind of saying this, well, why aren't we better at this? Somebody should do something. And I was like, oh, I'm somebody. So kind of on a whim, I decided to go get my doctorate. And so I did that. I went to Chapel Hill. It was lovely. It's very hot down there. I like Minnesota better. But it was fantastic. I had a good experience that was hard. And it was, I don't necessarily recommend that to people, but I definitely learned a lot. It was definitely a good thing for me. And so I got to bounce around to some other libraries. I got to do some consulting. I got to do a lot of training. I was a library professor for a while in Boston. And then I thought about spending the rest of my life in Boston. And that sounded very, very expensive and not much fun. So I still do that. I still teach for the same school, and it's great. But I wanted to be in the library and actually doing things. And so looked around, and I ended up here at CMLE. And I very genuinely, I hope everyone has, if you have such a twisty, circuitous career path, and I know a lot of library people do, I hope you get to end in such a wonderful place as this, because it is just it. And I know I sound gushy, but it is fantastic to come to work every day and I have the most wonderful members. They do all these fun things. I never have to be like the hard one and the mean one and the one who says, no, sorry, there's no money for that, because they know there's no money coming from me. So I get to be the one who, like, every day I'm like Christmas, like, here, have some books, here, have a grant application. It's great. And I am so spoiled by all of our members. So it's just been wonderful. But I think the takeaway is that everyone should be a librarian or in the library field. I don't think that there's a better thing that you can do if you want to do good things and save the world and be good for your community. This is the place. This is where all of those good things can happen. And yeah, I am very fortunate. Thank you, Minnesota.
Wow. I think that's a great answer. And we did hear about Mary's circuitous path. And so I'm going to ask Anne and Liz to expand that question a little the way Mary did, which is, what library path did you set out to follow? Did you want to be a public librarian always, or did you go somewhere else? And how did those choices affect the jobs you were offered and the jobs you accepted? But first, tell us where you went to school and give us an overview of that path, Anne. Can you do that?
Sure. So I went to library school in Madison, and I did that after getting a degree in history and then taking a few years off and realizing I did not want to be a history professor. I didn't want to do that anymore. So I
You muted yourself, Anne.
I think I did it.
So I don't know where I dropped off, but I began my sad tale in Madison. Then I became, no, it's a good tale. It's a good tale. I grew up thinking I would go into the foreign service or something like that. So took a lot of foreign languages, studied a lot of politics and economics, and ended up going back to library school to be an archivist. There was sort of a history tie there, and Wisconsin has a very good program. So, and then I worked at the Historical Society for a number of years, and then went into the Peace Corps, quit our jobs. I mean, I was married at the time. I'm still married. And we quit our good jobs and went to Czechoslovakia, and lived there for almost 4 years, where was a great opportunity to get a lot of training in community development and problem solving and bringing people together from a wide variety of backgrounds, challenging assumptions. And I also learned to write grants and manage projects there and do some training. So when I came back, I worked in a public library as a reference person for a while. That was the first time that I really got to use the internet, really, because that all kind of happened while we were in Slovakia, where there wasn't the internet. And then got a job as a library director in a small town and realized that that was the job for me. And it actually, I love being the director. And so then I think a path that can happen is if you start out in small rural systems, you can progress to increasingly larger independent libraries. I think it's tough to make the switch into a large metropolitan system. And I think it can be hard to make a switch away from a larger system to smaller systems. So I don't think I knew that I was making that kind of a career choice at the time. But I think that it can be hard to do that. And I also got lucky being able to switch over from archives, because I got to work in a public library when I was in Slovakia. Otherwise, I don't think I would have gotten interviews. I think that it's pretty easy to get pigeonholed into a certain career track in our profession, I think. So that was lucky for me. And then when this job opened up, I ended up getting talked to at a conference about things, which is just really great. I encourage people to go to those conferences and to go and talk to as many people as you can about what their jobs are like, what it is that they do all the time. And when I heard about what the challenges were in this region, I thought, yeah, that's right up my alley. I was ready for a change, to step away from public service. At the job I had right before this, I did a lot of direct public service. So it's been a good change.
Oh, great. This is the part I really like to hear about, people's paths to their current, and how many librarians, one, wanted to be in the Foreign Service. We've had several panelists who said, well, I started out thinking, or have been in the Peace Corps, which I think is also an interesting.
Yeah, it's a life of service, right?
It is a life of service, and how many different experiences people. I had a niece who was in the Peace Corps, not a librarian. And she once emailed me and said, well, what do you think of the Dewey Decimal System? What kind of question is that? But
I like it.
I like it. It works fine. But, you know, she was in some tiny town in Paraguay and they needed help setting up a library. Okay, use your resources, I guess. Anyway, but so many librarians I've met over the years who have been in the Peace Corps. So that was an interesting path. How about you, Liz? Where were you in the beginning, middle, and end here of your path?
I'm going to go way, way back.
Okay.
And, I grew up in rural North Dakota.
Ooh.
Didn't have a library, you know, had a school library that was maybe like the size of a restroom. Didn't have a public library, didn't know anything about it. And then I went to Morehead State University, and I had an opportunity to have a work study position on campus. And my older sister said, you should work at the academic library, because then you'll know what's available for you when you're doing your homework. And I was not a very studious person ever. I was a little more social maybe. And it was really the best advice I've ever received. And so while I went to MSUM, I worked in the academic library, and I absolutely fell in love with it. All of the librarians were so nice and so helpful, and I couldn't wait to graduate and figure out how to become an academic librarian myself. I just wanted to help people find the resources that they needed. Another thing that may be surprising is I'm not a huge reader, never have been. I'm more of a reader now, but I am more about helping people and about research and problem solving. And so that's the part that was very appealing to me and why I wanted to work in an academic library. Well, I remember talking to an academic librarian and asking, what do I have to do to become an academic librarian? And she said, well, for one thing, you should major in the sciences, and then you you should have 2 master's degrees. And I was like, ooh, I hate science. I mean, I don't even like school. You know, what am I going to do here? I couldn't major in like chemistry or anything. So I majored in anthropology. And just like there's a lot of librarians who go into the Peace Corps, there's an awful lot of librarians who have anthropology degrees. So
or art history.
Yeah, there you go. So I moved to the East Coast, and I did archaeological field work for a few years, and it's manual labor. And I was in a pit several meters underground, swinging a pickaxe, and it was 100 degrees outside and 100% humidity. And it was actually a really important archaeological site. And there were all these universities touring the site. And this professor leaned over my pit and said, is this really what you want to do for the rest of your life? And I said, no, I want to be a librarian. So he told me to come to Clarion University of Pennsylvania. So that's where I ended up getting my master's degree. at that time, I still knew I would only want to work in academic libraries. Who would want to work in a public library? And I applied for positions, and I did my internship at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and realized I don't think academic libraries are for me. Plus, every place where I would apply wanted the 2 master's degrees. And so I ended up working at the Enoch Pratt Free Library in inner city Baltimore. And that was a great experience. I did research for state agencies. So I loved the research part so much. But then every once in a while they'd say, we need somebody to fill in the youth department or the Maryland department or social sciences. So I really got to work in a lot of different areas at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. But then I missed my mom's meatballs and I needed to move back home. And so I told my husband, he told me, you have one chance to get a job back home. And that day I saw an advertisement in Library Hotline for Lake Agassiz Regional Library. And I applied for the job and I got it. And I think he was like, ooh. So that was 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years ago in May 1st that I've been working for Lake Agassiz. So working for Lake Agassiz, I was hired as the electronic resources librarian, which I think is kind of hilarious because back then we had this huge budget for electronic resources and now we have no budget for electronic resources. So thank you, Minitex and Elm. And I was also the staff development librarian. And I'm very much a people person. And so I talked to the regional library director at that time and I was like, I need people. And so I was able to get a position working at the Moorhead Public Library in a key supervisory role. And it was absolutely fantastic and I loved it. And every supervisor I ever had at Lake Agassiz Regional Library, they really taught me that being a director is not about just directing, it's about leadership and mentorship. And I had the best mentors ever at Lake Agassiz Regional Library. And so I was able to go from one position to another position to another position. At one point, I was the director of the Moorhead Public Library for a while. And then I believe it was maybe about 8 years ago or 9 years ago, I became the executive director of Lake Agassiz.
Well, that is a circuitous path from beginning to end. You might be the only one we've talked to. I think you are the only one we've talked to who has archaeological dig experience. What was the site?
It was, I was told to come to Pennsylvania and work on a project for 3 months because they were using federal funding to expand a highway along the Susquehanna River near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we were just doing a survey to see if there were any artifacts, but it turned out to be one of the biggest projects in Pennsylvania history and ended up lasting several years. So yeah, it was a blast, but I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore.
Well, that's swinging a pickaxe in 100% humidity. I can see your point.
Mm-hmm.
So now if we pretend we're talking to people who have never heard of libraries before, that might have been Liz when she was a kid, or anyone you've encountered in your current positions, describe your job without using all those library words that we always use. So, Mary Jordan.
I actually think about this a lot because I spend a lot of time with people who don't work in libraries or who maybe they are today working in their school library, but next semester, next year, they'll be working in the gym or whatever. And trying to sort of ballpark very quickly and concisely why they're important and why they're useful. And so I would say my role, many reasons libraries are important and useful. I'll step off that soapbox for the moment. But what I do and what my very teeny little organization of me and my colleague, what we do is we focus on identifying needs from our members, developing training and providing resources that help them to be successful. Our job is not to do successful things on our own. It's to help make sure that all of our members have what we can give them of what they need, and to help them to feel confident that they're ready to go out and do great things for their communities.
Okay. Because would never use the term multi-county, multi-type library system to somebody who had never heard of libraries before.
I don't think I've ever said those words in my life.
No. It is hard to explain what a multi-type is, sometimes even to other library staff in the state of Minnesota. But I think Mary did a good job about what we do, identifying what our very diverse members need, and then trying to help them fill those needs. And that, you know, people say, oh, you're a librarian, you work at library. Well, you know, we only work with libraries is kind of a hard concept, I think, to get across. But we do our best to support all our members with the training and resources that we have to offer. So
that is a common problem that I have when you're out socially and you meet people and I say, they say, what do you do? I'm a librarian. Oh, and everyone always says, at the public library or
right.
At the college? And I just, yes.
Might be easier.
Or I say, I do training for libraries, and people are confused.
Right.
It's all right.
Also, Anne, how would you describe your job to a stranger or someone who is unfamiliar with how libraries work? Oh, muted.
I usually focus on the biggest part of my job, which is the public side. And I usually say that I help make sure that all of the behind the scenes things work well. So I spend parts of my day talking with my department heads, talking about whatever projects we're working on to make the systems work better. So a big project we have is to figure out if we're going to stay with the same software that runs the library, the checkouts and the books and where they're at, and if you could managing all of that, and if we're going to change to a different kind of software or not, or if we should or shouldn't change the way that we get the books from one place to another. It's a lot of logistics, and it's a lot of getting people to decide something together because of the structure that we have. Everyone has to pretty much agree, and we have a lot of different opinions and budgets, and we have to get all of our members to want to do one thing. And then I spend a lot of time with numbers, which I like, but getting our budget to work in the way that we're funded and the way that we pay our bills means that in any given year, we might be $40,000 in the red or $80,000 in the black, and trying to get that to work out. This is a kind of a medium-sized budget for me. Our budget is about 1.7 million, 1.4 million, it depends on the year. That's about what the budget at Austin Public Library in Minnesota was, more or less, kind of the same. But how the budget is structured is very different. So the budget in Austin was mostly people and some building maintenance and a lot of collections. And my budget here is a lot of multi-year contracts for services. So I also spend a lot of time with contracts. And fortunately, I like that too. Another big part of my job is collaborating with the other organizations in the state. And that's my favorite part of the job, because I'm a pragmatic problem solver and an idealist. So I always want to make things better. And I just want to do what it takes to take the next step to get a little bit better.
I appreciate that about you. And an optimist as well. So Liz, never heard of libraries before? I've never heard of libraries. What is a library? Can you tell me what you do?
Maybe. So in a consolidated system, in Lake Agassiz Regional Library, we have about 90 people on the payroll. And, you know, they're all employees of Lake Agassiz Regional Library. So a lot of what I do is coordinating projects and resources, and also forming those relationships with the employees. I think that's really important. I really like to support employees as much as I possibly can to make them the best employees they can be and to be as happy as they possibly can be. So I'm big into mentorship and to making sure that everyone has the tools that they need to do the job the best that they can. Also in our headquarters, as I mentioned, we have these different departments that kind of do all the behind the scenes activities. And so it's HR and finance, collection development, IT, legacy and youth services, acquisitions, and then marketing. And so I really work very closely with the heads of all those departments to coordinate services and whatnot. And then also the way that our regional library system is laid out is we have something called a hub system where we have our 3 largest branches, and they actually oversee the rest of the smaller branches around them. And so it's a lot of working together and facilitating of working with the hub supervisors to make sure that everything is running smoothly around the region. No 2 days are ever the same, which I love about working in libraries. And I feel like my days are, you know, lots of email, responding to email, problem solving, answering questions, I think basically to sum it up, it's coordinating all activities around the region.
Okay. Well, Liz went right on to our next question, which is, what is a typical day like for you? And we know there is no typical day. Mm-hmm. And you've given a lot of the nitty-gritty details of what it means to your job. But if you wanted to add anything, you can do that before we ask Anne and Mary that question. Everybody begins with email.
Mm-hmm. It does. And it's so interesting because you never know what's going to be in that email on that particular day and where it's going to drag you. You know, it can, you know, it could literally drag you out of the building. You know, I do a lot of, well, not during the pandemic, but a lot of branch visits, but there's always a need somewhere. There's a need from a city, a county, a library, you name it. At Lake Agassiz Regional Library, we're kind of big on trying not to say no to people. And I'm not saying that we are like doing too much, you know, like we know our limits, but we try not to say no, and we try to be partners whenever possible. So, oh, you need somebody to write an Otto Bremer grant for your facility? I'll do it. You know, like we're big on partnership and doing what we have to do to make sure that people know we exist and to offer the best services we can.
Okay, great. So Ann Hokanson, what is your typical day or atypical day?
Well, I can work from just about anywhere. The pandemic really brought that home. Although I was thinking about, could I move to Alaska? And no, I think,
I don't think so.
That still living in the area and knowing what it's like here is really important for me to be able to understand what people are saying when they're talking about their library and what their needs are. So it was very surprising to me to move just a couple hours further west in Minnesota and see what a change it is. It's just so much more rural here than it was in the southeastern part of the state. And so that's part of what my job is. I guess to compare and contrast it, when I was a public library director, my job was a lot of immediate problem solving. Somebody's, a patron has something that needs to be addressed by me. Or I'd go to a lot of friends meetings and city council meetings, and lots of Rotary meetings, all of those kinds of things. I was on a lot of city committees for working to improve education or those kinds of things. And in the job that I have now, that is not my role. So the public library directors in our communities have those roles, but I do not. So I went from being leading a very public life to now I do not have a public role. And so that's been a very big change. So while I get to do a lot of the same things, I do them in a very different way. It can be that I can work in my office at home and not leave it for a couple days, and that never could have happened at my other job.
Okay, Mary?
I would say one of the handy things about my circuitous past career is that it prepared me for every day is who knows. Because I think that's, as my colleagues here are saying, it's that way pretty much everywhere. But when I was at Milwaukee getting my degree, I was casting around for a job, and I worked in the map library, which if you are ever in Milwaukee, it is one of the top 10 map libraries in the world. And I so wanted to stay there. And I was talking to them saying, so how do I get to be a map librarian? And they were like, yeah, you got to wait for somebody to die, because nobody leaves these jobs. I'm like, ugh, you all look real healthy. I guess I should look around. So now I try to be really grateful every day that, as far as I know, there's nobody just waiting for me to die. So, but it's exciting, and I get to try all these new things, and I get to do all these new things. And I've written a lot of grants over the years, and I've worked with libraries to help them write grants. But we wrote our first grant at CMLE a couple of years ago, and we got these VR kits. I know nothing about VR. I knew nothing about it. But it was so fun. It was so exciting, and we've had such a good time with that. So back in the day when I would go visit schools in person and drop them off and talk to the kids about it, that was really fun. But like right now we're working on strategic planning, and I love stuff like that. So we're writing a new strategic plan. We answer emails. All of a sudden somebody will email us and say, oh no, I just found out that the school board is going to eliminate funding for our library at the end of this semester. What should I do? And we drop everything and jump on it. We have podcasts that we produce. And again, I knew nothing about that except I like podcasts. And I always say I bought a podcast and a cord, and I handed it to my colleague Angie, and I'm like, I think this is all we need. Let's just go. No, the short version is no, there's so much more than that. But we have now produced 2 podcast episodes every week for like 3 years. It's been amazing, and that has been such a good thing. I mean, it's fun for us, but it's been so much fun because it gives us a chance to not only like talk about library issues, to talk about books, but we also have been able to reach out to all of these really fun people to have them on to talk about what they do in libraries. Yeah, it's just, some days are just, we're going to record for 8 hours straight, go. Some days we're in the car, some days we're at home. It's just every day is new and different. And I think that's a theme you're sensing across all of us. But it's, I think it's really important, no matter what your job is, to make it your own and to make it more interesting for yourself. I will very briefly say, I'm sorry, I'm going to hog my time to share my husband, when I went to library school, my husband was like, I think I could do that. And so he went to library school and got hired as a, I don't know, periodicals librarian in a library outside of Chicago. And while he was there, he was bored. So he taught himself how to design websites, and the periodicals department got dropped. And so he continues there and is still the I don't remember what they call it, but in charge of everything in the library that plugs in, essentially, is what he says his job is. And that's just another example. Make your job into something that's interesting for you. I think that's important, and I think it's so doable in libraries.
Mm-hmm. But no typical days, it seems. It's, you start with the email and see what happens. I'd say that's pretty true across the board, because libraries do so many different things.
It's the first job I've had ever in my life where I don't work nights and weekends. So that's a prediction. That's a predictability I never had before. That it wasn't even on my radar that would be true when I came to this job.
Well, that's interesting, because I have never had a job that had nights and weekends, and I've been a librarian for close to 40 years. So I think if that's important to you, you need to kind of look and see, because I worked at lots of, special libraries in particular, which I worked in the federal government, not for the federal government. We were contractors, but that was 8 to 5, So, I worked at the State Library of Ohio. That was 8 to 5 sort of thing. So I think that's an interesting thing, even though it was traditional library work, no nights and weekends. So, and, Metronet's pretty much 9 to 5, 9 to 6. So one of the questions we ask usually for special librarians or law librarians or academic librarians is, are there special degrees or licenses? In Minnesota, we don't have a certification to be a public librarian, but do your jobs require an MLIS and MLS to do them? And what kind of specialized terminology do your jobs require? Because we could give everybody the acronym test and see how that goes. So Anne, do you want to start? Does your job require an MLS, and what did you?
My job does require an MLIS, and I would say the other education that I got that helped me get this job was Cornell has an e-learning program, like a distance education kind of program, and I did an HR certificate through them, and so that was really great experience. And then it does also require public library experience.
Okay. Is that similar for you, Liz?
Yep. MLS or MLIS from a accredited institution. And I wish I had the HR background. I think that would be awesome. There's so many other degrees I wish I had other than anthropology for this job. Mm-hmm.
And Mary, how about you? Does your job require an MLS or?
100% it does. And I will say that I also do, I feel like, although I don't practice law and I did only very, very briefly and not well, I'm a much better librarian. That has been extremely helpful to me because has given me a extreme lack of fear in approaching reading big complicated things. I can read a contract and not freak out, which I mean is obviously a skill that Anne has as well, but it was very helpful. One of the best things that I accidentally learned how to do was to write grants at my first public library. We had no money, we had nothing. It was an extremely low income community. And so being forced into that was fantastic. And so now as someone who teaches master's students, I make them write grants in class and they hate it, but they love it later. I've also worked in academic libraries, and I will say that I know it's very popular to say that you have to have a second master's, and sometimes you do if you're in the specialized areas. In the map library I was in, many of them had a second master's in something like GIS or cartography or something like that. But I worked in a law library where everyone also had to have the law degree, but I've worked with a couple of kind of higher level sciencey, researchy type libraries, including like libraries that do research for military work. And they definitely need like high level master's degrees. But if you want to transition yourself into an academic library and you're thinking reference desk, you may not need that second master's, but honestly, any kind of extra training that you can get in almost anything will always be helpful in a library.
Mm-hmm. I think a multi-type director can also have a media specialist media degree.
That
so
would be
not
really
exclusive,
helpful.
At least I think that's the way Metronet's jobs are advertised, either an MLS or a master's in media from wherever.
That is the only kind of library that I've never worked in, is a school library. And that's most of what I do now. But I have been lucky to work with people, but yeah.
And as you said earlier, most libraries do the same types of things. They may do them to a different degree, may focus on one end or the other, but knowing library concepts and library processes and procedures can usually be applied across the board. But in all these conversations, we're talking about management skills, supervisory skills, the ability to coordinate projects, so project management skills, grant writing, HR, those sorts of things. So let's start with Liz. Did you have all these skills before you became the library director at became system director at Lake Agassi?
Oh,
does that mean no?
So funny. No, but I think that what it comes down to is, can you communicate effectively? Are you good with people? Are you a listener? I think that there's some core skills that anyone can have coming out of any type of situation and be successful in the library field. I think you have to be ambitious because you never know what's going to be thrown at you in a library. And like Mary was saying earlier, it seems like so many positions in libraries, they are what you make of them. And so I think if you're ambitious and you're good with people and you can communicate, I think that's half the battle right there. Or those are the skills that you need to be successful in your position.
Okay. So learning on the job to some extent, but having some background. I thought it was interesting when Mary said she didn't recommend becoming a library director right out of library school.
Mm-hmm. And one thing in the Moorhead Public Library, it's not, I can't say it's an urban library, but the Fargo-Moorhead area has about, 180,000 people. And we hire a lot of librarians at the Moorhead Public Library, library associates, straight out of MSUM or Concordia, just recent college graduates. And no matter what they've majored in, they just need a job. We'll hire them, we'll give them the training that they need on the job. what a great, and we acknowledge that we don't pay very much, and that if you come to us, it's going to be a stepping stone onto your next position. But I just think that employing people at the Moorhead Public Library is such a gift to really help people thicken their skin and learn how to work through tough situations with tough customers. And I really feel like you're kind of like thrown into this battleground almost. And the skills that you acquire learning how to negotiate with people and deal with people is like a gift that they can then take to whatever field they're going to go in. I just can't say enough about the experience that you get from even if it's not your career, it's just a job for you. It's a job that can really give you the skills you need to move on.
Okay. So we know the pandemic has had a whole impact on everybody. And can you talk about how that's impacted your organizations and how that has evolved since a year ago? I mean, we're coming up on a year here of pandemic restrictions. So maybe Anne, begin with that. Tell us how the pandemic has impacted TDS and your working life.
Well, in very, concrete, specific ways, it certainly did. It was a lot of, immediate scrambling around the public libraries closed. And so then delivery was suspended. And fortunately for us, again, like back to the contract things, fortunately for us, the delivery service provider was just as happy to suspend service. But on the sad part of that, though, was then they decided that they did not want to resume service. So then when we were able to open back up, what that meant for us is that instead of doing the work that we were supposed to maybe be doing, we were, the people in my office and me too, we were driving delivery vans around to get tons of books to public libraries. So it was a real opportunity to just jump in and do what needs to be done and solve a lot of immediate problems. And then be part of the state's conversation about how state funding was maybe going to help out with that. And that was exciting to be able to leverage those funds and really make a difference for families with expanding internet access, either to parking lots or with Wi-Fi hotspots and computers. So lots of money very fast started coming in various ways, and that can be both good and bad. And so just to be able to have a chance to make that be as a good thing was very exciting. So kind of fun, but at the same time, worrying about everyone's health, and now I don't think we're done. I mean, I'm worrying a lot about or preparing rather than worrying, preparing for what the pandemic might do to city and county budgets down the road, because that will have a deep, deep impact.
Were all your staff able to work from home? Did you have people on site at the TDS offices, or?
Well, it was interesting because the setup here is quite different in that, they're TDS office employees, and I have a board, but it's quite a bit different than working for a city public library where really you're all city employees and you fall under that group of rules. So we did keep everyone on except for one person. We did lose one position that was permanently furloughed.
Okay. So how did the pandemic impact Lake Agassiz Regional Library?
So I hate to be so optimistic and positive about a pandemic, but for Lake Agassiz Regional Library, there was a lot of opportunity during the pandemic. And like Ann said, we closed up shop for a little while, but our staff worked from home for a few weeks probably. And never before have we had a time to like push the pause button, to stop, to evaluate services. It really was a true gift at that time to be able to just pause. And it's just so interesting because we closed our doors on like March 17th or whatever. And immediately the administrative team started communicating, and we're like, okay, we have to start offering services online, virtually. You know, we need to get a chat service going. We need to make sure we have a phone that for the entire region that's staffed, 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. to serve all of the counties. We really reinvented library services, turned everything upside down and offered this virtual service. It didn't take long though for us to like really realize that not everyone has virtual capabilities. Not everyone has phones. Not everyone can find our phone number. Sometimes we would be in the library, just a couple of us here in Moorhead, and people would be pounding on the door. You know, I need to communicate with my friends and family. This is my only way to communicate, through your computers or through your phone. And so it didn't take long for us to realize, like, if there's ever a time that people need libraries, it's during a pandemic. And so early on, we opened our doors and we started letting people in again. And it's amazing. We had this long list of a wish list of things that we've been wanting to do at Lake Agassiz for years. And it's like, we've been talking about it. Oh, how can we make these things happen? And then all of a sudden, bam, it's go time. And, all of a sudden it was no problem to create online library card applications or subscribe to Hoopla or to start checking out Wi-Fi hotspots. There was just like this huge list of things that we've always wanted to do, but overanalyzing. We could just never do it. And this really gave us the push to be able to do it. In addition to that, we did receive CARES Act funding. We received funding from the Department of Education for the Wi-Fi hotspots. There was a statute change for our regional library telecom aid that opened some doors for us. Never before have we had funding like this to try new things and to like reinvent this new library to better serve people coming out of this pandemic. It's really been like, it's just changed our organization. Also, a big part of it was offering virtual legacy programs, which have just been a huge success. I can't believe, like, I get phone calls, we get emails. People are just like, thank you for providing these online programs. It's giving me a sense of community. It's just really great to hear from people. But other than online programming, of course, we haven't had any in-person programming. Mm-hmm. And so this is exciting too, because coming out of this pandemic, we have a plan for starting our programming again. It kind of felt like our programs across all locations were kind of just all over the place, like we didn't have a real focus. And there's a lot of time and energy wasted in a regional library system when there isn't that focus. So coming out of this pandemic, we're going to we have this plan if the numbers remain low and if COVID goes away, to just start trying some programs, like we're going to stick to the basics. Like, we'll try some story times and see how that goes. We'll have some book discussion groups, like those core library programs. From there, we're hoping to say, what programs or who can you bring in to talk about workforce development, economic development, how to help with education and different literacy efforts and equity. And so we're saying, branches out there, plan your programs for the fall, but they have to fall under these categories, and bring experts in to talk about these areas rather than trying to do things yourself. And so we feel very focused And we're very focused on like building people up, providing the support that people need and that communities need. Of course, we'll still have our little craft times and all that stuff, but no more of this planning programs that aren't working again and again. If something doesn't work, it's out of here. Let's try something new. So we're just kind of easing back into programming. And I just hope that we can stick to just meaningful and purposeful programming that can really lift people up in our communities.
So in some ways, it almost sounds like that's your pandemic silver lining, that it gave you some relief from day-to-day library activities to allow you to reassess the things that you could do under these circumstances of having the buildings closed or whatever. And as you say, implement your long list of I wish we could, because now there was time to do the planning. And I think that certainly shows an element of what a system director's responsibilities are, that ability to turn on a dime, as it were, and not look at everything as, oh my gosh, library service will never be the same. And that's probably true. Library service never will be the same. But the silver lining of maybe this is the improved library service that we're going to see. And I love it when you testify at the legislature, Liz. I mean, I think you just really do a great job. And it's clear that you're a true believer and also a leader.
Well, and Ann Hokinson and I have talked about this, but I mean, you know, it's like another area in which this pandemic was, I hate to say a gift to libraries, you know.
But, I know, but we know what you mean.
I don't mean to downplay
it's that look on the bright side.
But, you know, closing libraries for a few weeks was a true exercise in realizing what a vital resource we are in our communities. The people who literally would cry when they could come back in because the librarian is the only person that they have contact with on a day-to-day basis, or it's the only way they can communicate with their friends and family through our computers, you know, or they haven't been able to take care of benefits or whatever because they haven't had internet access, you know, like people came back and were like, thank you for opening your doors again. Please be safe. We love our library. You know, I mean, they were truly like, you are a vital part of society.
I can't live without you.
Yeah.
No, I know somebody who, I don't know how she's been since the beginning of the pandemic, where she was at the library, not every day, but almost every day, because that was her computer access. You know, she's originally from Germany. That's how she communicated with her family in Germany. It's like, what have you, I mean, I hope she found people to help her do this, but yes, that whole crying to get back into the computers, I get it. You know.
And just one more thing is that the partnerships that have come out of this pandemic have been unreal, you know, like Career Force, I don't believe they're open yet to the public.
No, I don't think so.
But they are coming into the libraries to meet with people. And mental health agencies are using our libraries to meet with clients. And there's just, Legal Aid of Minnesota has placed remote legal kiosks in our libraries so that they can continue to provide legal services. It's just incredible. And it's just like so awesome to know that other organizations and state agencies know what we have to offer and they want to be a part of it. And I feel like together we can all like lift each other up to provide the best services possible to our communities. So I feel like the momentum is building and this is a really exciting time in public libraries.
I agree with you. I you know, see mostly what metro area public libraries are doing, and they're doing a lot of the same things, but you know, the resources are broader and deeper here than they are in rural areas or areas that have one major metropolitan area as opposed to 8 or 9 like we do. So I really think the awareness of what would I do if my public library didn't ever reopen is really eye-opening for a lot of people, you know, whether they're library staff or funding officials, we hope. So it's interesting how this is a two-edged sword. I mean, it's tough. And of course, to be worried about everybody's health and safety, you know, and dealing with people who don't want to cooperate, you know, but there are always people in public libraries who don't want to cooperate with the rules, you know, they don't want a limit on whatever. So anyway, that's great. And Mary, how did the pandemic change you, your library organization?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So unlike these other guys, we provide no library service. We have no libraries, and our staff are me and Angie. So we were listening to NPR, I think, and they popped on and they said, oh yes, the WHO has announced that this is officially a global pandemic. And I just looked at her and I'm like, those are key words. I spent some time working in bioethics, and I knew about pandemics, and I said, okay, so pack, because we're going home and we'll probably be there for, 2 or 3 weeks at least. So make sure you take home enough things. That was March. We haven't been back to the office, and we're not going to. We're not going back to our office anytime soon. Our office space is in a warehouse, and we're renting from another organization, and they're awesome. But it's in a warehouse that has no windows and almost no airflow, and they've already had a COVID outbreak in the building, and we're not going back for the foreseeable future, which has worked out fine. So because our job, though, is do support for our members, make our members, what can we do to help them? So many of our members are school libraries. And again, people who might be only working part-time, people who don't have a lot of library background and experience. They're great. I mean, they could do great things. They don't necessarily know what great things they should be doing. And so we got together and we were talking a little bit, and I said, oh, well, what we need to do is help, make sure that they have all these good resources that they can be giving to their students and giving to the parents. And we need to encourage them to do that. And about 5 minutes later, I said, yeah, that's stupid. We should be doing that, and we'll give it to them. So every single day the quarantine happened, 7 days a week, we posted a page with resources and activities and educational projects to do that people could do at home. Some of them were online, some of them weren't, but we gave them to our members and everybody so that they would have something right there at hand that they could give to kids, give to parents, give to the teachers, and they wouldn't have to go looking for things. And that was really nice. We got listed by a bunch of national organizations right at the beginning that were looking for things like that. We also really ramped up the podcast and the training that we were doing online with that was asynchronous, because who could schedule? Who knew when they were going to be places? I had been vehement. We would never, never, never record our podcast online, because being together in person as we talked was so important. And then we had a global pandemic, you may have heard. And we actually spent a lot of time looking for software that you could record podcast on, and all this fancy stuff and all these different things. And the short version, if you're interested in podcasting, is it seems to all be garbage. We couldn't make any of it work. And so we record everything on Zoom. Yay, Zoom. And so we started recording a bunch of podcasts. I started making videos. I have a whole series of videos where I'm sitting on the floor in front of the front door in my house, because it was the only place I could get a decent angle. But it was good, and our numbers that what people were using shot way up because we were trying to talk to them about things that they actually needed. As different libraries started reopening, we had different types of library people come on and record with us to talk about what they were doing. We recorded a podcast about when OCLC and other organizations started the realm studies to try and figure out, hey, what should we be doing? What's safe? How do we make materials safe? We recorded really detailed podcasts about that OCLC picked up and started sharing. So that was exciting too. I felt very briefly famous. But again, we try to just kind of keep up that support role and keep talking with people. It was literally the Friday before the schools all closed the buildings. And I try to be very clear, schools closed the buildings. Schools did not close. The school buildings, the Friday before that, I was out picking up VR kits, and I had appointments the next Monday to drop them off at more schools. So it's just been so interesting to see how everybody has responded to it, and to try and figure out, in just this ever-changing situation, what could we be doing to help? One of the things that we are now starting to segue into providing for members, and we'll be putting all of this up all over our website, is we're providing stress management skills. I've done a bunch of research on stress management in libraries before the pandemic that has really come in handy. And we're going to be putting up more self-care, because we're starting to get more like tearful phone calls, tearful requests that I don't know what is happening tomorrow. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how I can keep going to work, phone calls. And I think especially, I mean, everyone has had a pandemic, but especially for the school people who may not have had all the training in libraries, or may not have been, had as much time or as much confidence in themselves and in their skills to be good at the library, being online, then being in person, and then being hybrid, and then being back online, and then being back in person. That has been, I mean, just so incredibly everything else aside, professionally difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's our new focus that we're really trying to work on.
Yeah, I think the pandemic changed everything. We of course, there are two of us, and we work 2 plus a small percentage of another person, and we can pretty much work at home. And we had talked about this even prior to the pandemic, that we could work in our cars if it came to that. Just need to be able to have the access to the Wi-Fi at McDonald's parking lot or public library parking lots. Because now, of course, we're paying for very expensive storage space at 1619 Dayton. So we'll have to see, but we've expanded our online programming too. This particular series came after the pandemic, and it's been great because we would have in-person programming, and we think, oh, I hope 4 people show up. But with this, we've had as high as 85 people show up, and it's like, who are all these people? But also we've been able to invite non-Minnesota or non-metro area panelists. If we had this face-to-face, we wouldn't necessarily have had Liz Lynch and Ann Hokinson and Mary Jordan on our panel, because it's a big deal to travel to the Twin Cities for a 2-hour panel discussion. One of the panels for special librarians, we had somebody from NASA, which was kind of cool. So anyway, I do think a lot of things will continue on. The lessons we've learned in the pandemic is online programming works in some situations. It's great to have face-to-face programming too. And I do like the face-to-face like club book that MELSA offers in each of the suburban libraries, where you see other people who like the same author you like, which is fun. But you could live without that if you had to. So.
And just to echo what you're saying, I just love the opportunity for inclusivity throughout this pandemic, with Jennifer Nelson, the state librarian, calling meetings and inviting all librarians to those monthly meetings. I feel like of the 20 years I've worked in Minnesota Public Libraries, we've never had such an inclusive environment, and to be invited to do something like this. And even in our 7-county region, we always say we're geographically challenged, but you can have a meeting at the drop of a hat to have, this is face-to-face, like we can still.
Right, this is face-to-face, you're right.
You can hear tones, and it's really, I don't know, it's pretty awesome.
I agree.
I mean, why wouldn't we
Also,
continue?
right. Well, that's my real wonder, is because the technology stepped up, but it isn't new. And we had all these tools before and we didn't avail ourselves. And so it really makes me wonder what will we keep, and what lessons will we learn, which I hope will just keep going forward. Online programming, for example, has not been just a gangbuster hit down here, but we're a federated system, so we don't do one kind of program and then advertise it across all 9 counties. That's our programming has historically been all about meeting a local need and lots of building community place, a community activity. So to just turn that and put it onto a virtual platform has meant that a turnout might be 6 people, where before we would get 60. Whereas Liz, in your experience, a physical location would maybe have gotten 15 people, and now you're getting 400. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to learn from each other across, and then also not stop taking advantage of all of the good things that have happened, which I think it could be a little bit tempting to just go back to normal.
I think so too, because certainly when the pandemic ends, we're all going to be desperate to go somewhere. I mean, you know, whether it's visiting your mother in the nursing home or whether it's, you know, going to Savers. I mean, it's like, where have I been since March? We go to I say we, it's Olivia who goes to the office once a month to scan the bills to the accountant, you know, and, you know, one key bill, they won't send us electronically, which is our insurance bill from Ramsey County. So, but maybe there's a hybrid way to do this, that we could do our wind downs both in person and online somehow. That's going to take different equipment and different whatever, but I don't know. I think we have learned a lot, and I hope we don't forget those lessons and can build on those lessons, because otherwise it was a wasted year. And we know it hasn't been a wasted year, because we know library services have continued and changed and grown and adapted in different ways. But, you know, I mean, this is probably an anticlimactic question after this discussion about the pandemic, but, you know, you must have had some idea of what you were signing up for when you became a system director. But tell us something that surprised you about your job once you'd been in it for a while. And I think we can exclude the pandemic, because that surprised everybody. So Mary, was there something in your job that really came as a big surprise?
Gosh, I wish I had a really clever response. I would say, and this shouldn't have been surprising, but I have been surprised and pleased by, I mean, all our members. I'm just gonna, we love them all, but the work and the effort and the original things that our school members are doing is, I did not know. And I said, that's, I mean, I worked in all these other kinds of libraries and I felt very comfortable working with them, no problem. And I just wasn't as familiar with the school libraries. So the first time I showed up at a school library to visit them, and they were working with the robots at the kids, the little teeny, like 5 and 6 year old kids were programming the robots. I had no idea that was a thing. And just the scope and breadth of what school library people have to do, I didn't understand. And I also find it kind of frustrating sometimes that I wish their school would just let them just do library things, stop doing all these other things. But that's my own problem. And it's interesting. So I would say it's predominantly a good surprise and a little bit of a bad surprise that I wish more schools had library people who were just focused on just doing library work, instead of running all over the building, fixing people's Chromebooks.
Yeah. Liz, was there a big surprise when you took over at Lake Agassiz? Maybe not, but.
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise was that I didn't realize how much time and effort would have to be put into securing funding, whether it's from the cities or the counties or the state or donations. A lot of my time and effort goes into securing funding. And then in previous positions, or we do have 3 directors in the system, Moorhead, Crookston, and Detroit Lakes. When I was the Moorhead Library Director, I was so shocked. You can barely be a librarian or a library director because it's all about fixing the facility.
Fixing the facility.
Yeah.
So shoveling, they don't have to shovel the snow, do they? Or
no,
do they?
But it's,
okay,
you know,
good.
calling repair people about the elevator, having the roof fixed, having HVAC system, you know, it's nonstop in the larger locations.
Interesting. How about you, Ann Hoganson? What surprised you when you?
Unmute.
Unmute.
What surprised me was how much I didn't know about regional systems. So I'd been a part of regional systems in both in Wisconsin and of course in Minnesota. Knew all the acronyms, but didn't really understand how different all of the systems were from each other and how all together collectively they provide service to Minnesota. And how each one brings something unique and powerful to that. We would be really, we would all lose if any one system stopped doing the things that they do. We would feel that vacuum. Which isn't to say that change shouldn't happen or be looked at. I don't mean to imply that, but just every job that you take, you have to learn all over again that yet again, you know nothing. So, and that's been great. I didn't really expect to make such a big change at this point in my life. I'm 57. And so I kind of thought, okay, I'll just work in public libraries, like in a public library building. And that'll be my thing. And so it's been great to make a change, and I recommend it. I recommend that if you're, you know, in your 50s and you get an opportunity to change, to grab it.
Okay. Well, I would say the thing that surprised me most was coming to Minnesota from other states and looking at how the systems operate in the 3 types plus 1 type of systems, how little evolution has actually taken place. You know, that Minnesota libraries do seem somewhat resistant to change. So having worked at higher levels, I would say, at state levels, for example, I'm surprised we didn't have a state library too, you know, in the sense of one that really provides solid direction on library development and library planning. That was, and I worked at the state library in my first library job here in Minnesota. And I can remember saying to the state librarian at the time, I cannot find the Minnesota state plan for library development. And her response was, well, that's because there isn't one. You know, my response to that was, well, how do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? And I think that still hangs over Minnesota libraries in the sense of we could be great, and we are great individually, but we could be so much greater as a really well-developed, cooperating group of library systems. And I think that is an ongoing weakness. But, you know, I have a whole stump speech about this, which I'll spare all of us because most of you have probably already heard it. So if we talk about the basics, we already know the minimum qualifications for your job. Is there some kind of, and this might be regionally as well as type of system different, a ballpark starting salary? You don't have to tell us your salary, obviously, but you know, if I saw a job advertised to be the library, a public library system director or multi-type system director, what would be the starting salary? And what other qualifications are they looking for? You know, how many years of experience, what type of experience? And do you want to start?
Sure. I think it can depend a lot on what the funding structure is and who's in charge of making those decisions. I think I can share that for the public regional systems, the regional directors range is pretty broad. That might range anywhere from in the 80s to approaching 150. So a really broad range.
That's a huge range.
There's also a large geographic range, where people live, and a range of experiences too that people bring to those jobs. So I think that a lot more variation there than I would have thought. I think that the minimum qualifications are usually very understated. I think that they're usually looking for someone with a lot more qualifications and experience than is listed there. Things that I would say to anybody who's looking to get into any sort of an administrative role is to get as much HR and supervisory experience as you can. I mean, if you're an undergrad and working on something, and get yourself to Target and get a job so that you can manage the frontline checkout people. Because that's what you're going to need to know. That's what a bulk of your job is going to be as you're working your way up.
So practical experiences, whether they're in a library or not.
People, anything, managing people.
Mm-hmm. So Liz, do you have anything to add to that? No? Or Mary?
No, I don't think so.
Yes, 1,000%. And I will step off my soapbox because I could do this for an hour. So I have spent a good chunk of my career not only being a librarian, but also I have taught across several different master's programs. And so I spend a lot of time with the brand new baby librarians who are just getting started, and they come sit in my office and what should I do? Where do I want to go work? And I always say, and I will say that this is with a little level of bias. My research and teaching specialty is management, evaluation, things like that. But I think it is a crime that everyone is not required to do minimum 1 semester of management, because when you get into almost any job, you will manage people, you will manage projects, you will manage budgets. And I think increasingly my experience is not extensive, but just my experience with people coming out of library school is that they are younger. When I was in library school many years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth. I was coming from other careers and I'd had a lot of other experience, but a lot of the students I work with now, this is their first career and they're just out of college and they don't have that kind of practical experience. I am 1,000% with Anne on this, that I worked retail management jobs back in my reckless, misspent youth. And I love, as a person who's hired library people all over the place, I love to hire people who have retail experience that need to just get the job done, bang it out. This is not necessarily going to be fun. So yes, whatever you can do to get in there, if you be a frontline manager at Target, if you can get into a restaurant even and do that, that practical experience, management will never fail you. You will never be sad that you have a little bit more management experience. The other experience that I think every library needs, and I believe this is a fault across our profession, is that most librarians, too many librarians, are not good with money and do not know how to do budgets. And the first time you learn about a budget is, here's $500,000 to spend, do it well, we'll check back with you in a year. That is not great. We should be doing better. And so if you're thinking about moving into a position where you might touch the money, for example, in an academic library, you know, depending on the size of your collection, you could easily be spending in your first year, you know, $300,000, $1 million, depending where you are. I want to hear about your $1 million budget. But I mean, that's not excessive at all in a lot of libraries to have that much money going through just you. So learning to be comfortable in leadership skills, learning to be comfortable in budgetary skills. I have a whole dissertation about the competencies that you need to be successful as a leader in libraries and as a library director. I will spare you. It is not interesting. But it was really interesting to have to read through all the literature and figure it all out. And so, but my takeaway from that is it doesn't so much matter specific skills that you have, but build more management skills, get better at working with other people, get comfortable in being the one who's out front and making decisions. And yeah, I think that's very helpful in a system library too.
I think this is interesting to have, because Anne and Mary have both offered very, you know, practical ways to get this experience, because a lot of the questions we've gotten throughout all these panels is, how do I get this experience? You know, and I don't think anyone up to today until today said, so go work at Target so that you can become a team leader or go whatever. And I think managing money you can do in a local organization. You can join whatever the Lions, Rotary.
Get yourself on your community ed board.
Right.
You know, be the treasurer of your local Rotary club. Those are all ways to get that experience that you're going to need to get that first director job.
For
everything you do will be helpful. If you
Right.
belong to a church, a synagogue, they will be thrilled to have you. Yeah, definitely. I'm with Anne that those community organizations, they need people, and your skills will pay off.
Well, and your contributions will pay off because you'll learn, and you'll hope that within that organization, whether it's Rotary or whatever, whoever held that treasurer position prior to you will be willing to help you learn how to do it. My local DFL committee, we're lucky we have a great treasurer, but they're always looking for a secretary or some other meeting organizer. And that truly is an exercise in herding cats. So, you know, that'll look good on your resume as well.
A skill we haven't really talked about is being able to run meetings. And I think like being able, anytime that you can, any organization that you're part of, you're on the board or something, don't shy away. Volunteer to be the chair of the advisory committee, because you'll have that opportunity to really learn just how valuable and important setting that agenda is, how to manage dissent, how to get to consensus, really key skills.
Yes. And we all appreciate those people who know how to run a meeting.
Definitely.
No, please don't waste my time. So are there professional organizations you belong to, and how do those benefit you? And would you recommend that new librarians or people who are changing?
Just going to say this actually. So good way to go, Anne. She's so smart, guys. This is another thing that I recommend to not only my students, but I've recommended to library people across my career is join a professional organization. So I've belonged to a lot of them. I'm currently a life member of ALA, but I've belonged to like ACRL. I've belonged to the Public Library Association. I've belonged to a lot of small ones, and just because the way my career went, I've also spent a lot of time like doing research and publishing and giving presentations at conferences all over the country. And that is so fantastic. especially I think if you're in a small library, if you're the only one who's in your building who does what you do, because conferences are not always like edge of your seat exciting. They are just not. I do have a couple podcasts about how to go to conferences well, but subscribe to Linking Our Libraries. That's my plug. But when you go to conferences, you have the chance to talk to the interesting people in the profession. And they might be the interesting people in your little corner of the state. They might be the interesting people across the world. I've been to some international library conferences. And in fact, I mentioned one of my areas of library research for a while until it got too depressing was stress in the library workplace. And I got started on that because I was at a conference in Bologna and I was talking to a Canadian librarian who was doing similar work. And she ended up getting too depressed to keep going. So I picked it up. Yeah, it was just, you never know who you're going to meet. You will find interesting people, you will find new skills, and I think you will have the chance to really reinvigorate your profession if you not only join but are reasonably active. Don't overcommit yourself, but get active. And I'm going to also give a small plug for write down what you do at work and publish it, share it, put it on your blog, publish it in the professional journals. They are begging for you to do it. And I've talked to so many people who say, oh, I don't know, what I do isn't that important. I don't know if I really, yes, you have a contribution. Yes, they want to hear from you. Yes, please do it. If anybody has checked out, there's a blog called the Library Writer, WRITER blog, and they pull together all kinds of like requests for conference proposals, requests for chapter proposals, and right now is a very hot time that everybody is looking for experience. So please look around, please share your experience. You have interesting things to share, please do it. Stepping off my soapbox. Sorry.
Okay. So Liz, how about professional organizations?
Just always been a member of ALA, PLA, MLA. And then outside of the library world, I'll be honest, I attend a lot of city council meetings around the region and county commission meetings and like to present and stuff like that. And so I learned early on to say no to a lot of community organizations.
Volunteer opportunities.
Volunteer opportunities, or like Rotary, or just some of those civic organizations where you have to commit to a lot of your time. I've always said that when my youngest son has his driver's license, I will become more. Closing in 10 minutes. Sorry, I will become more involved in those types of organizations. But I don't think I would. I think I would be doing a disservice to myself and others by overcommitting. So I try to be realistic about that.
I think that's realistic, to set those boundaries and be as involved as you can be. Although you don't need this, Liz, but MLA and the other library organizations also offer an opportunity to develop a skill, which I also think is valuable as a manager, and that is how to present. And Liz mentioned that her presentations at commissioners or city council or whatever, engaging, informative presentations go a whole lot longer than reading from your slides. So taking those opportunities to submit what you know to MLA or wherever too. So Ann Hokinson, what do you think about professional organizations?
I think, yeah, those are mentioned, I guess I came up through city libraries, and so it was very important for me to be part of Rotary and the Friends group and the Ladies Floral Club, list kind of went on. But there are a lot of city or county training opportunities for community development, and, just making people aware that you want to do those things. Sometimes they're offered through Chamber of Commerce's or through the city. Blandon has a community development group that does those things. Those have been very valuable to me. And I think I learned the most about, I learned the most given the hours that I put into it in going to the city council meetings in Austin for 14 years. That's where I really saw how things get done and how they're talked about and how priorities are set. Don't look, I guess everything is a learning opportunity. What can seem like a real chore might really pay off.
Great. So we're going to wrap this up. We have a few minutes left, and this is a big question, but we'll begin with Ann Hokinson. Tell us what you see as the future for your particular job or organization in the library world. Is it here to stay? Do you think it'll be phased out? Are already changes afoot? Tell us what you think. Our library's going away.
Topic, right?
I
Everybody
know.
who knows me knows I live 5 years into the future all the time. So that's where I spend my life. So I think I think the pandemic has accelerated our understanding of the opportunities that change can bring us. So I think that we will be in a time of rapid change. And I think it won't be even across the state. I think different parts of the state based have responded differently. Liz, I was struck by your comment about people being so anxious to get back in to use computers. That's not necessarily the experience down here. So I think the experience down here was mostly, oh, people got off, people finally got broadband installed to their house, or they finally upgraded their plans, or they finally bought enough devices for their house. So different responses across different parts of the state. So I think it'll be uneven adaptation, but I think I think change will be rapid in some ways.
What do you think, Liz?
Will you ask the question one more time?
What do you see about the future, basically? Where do you see the future for your particular organization or job? And also in the library world in general, do you think libraries are going to go away? Or are we going to be phased out?
No.
No, there are changes.
I don't think we're going away, but I don't know. I do think that this has been a great lesson of how do we learn to tell our story better, and how do we make sure that everyone understands that we're very relevant in today's society and moving forward. Anne mentioned earlier that she's a little nervous about future funding. I'm a little nervous about future funding as well, because so much of our funding comes from our cities and counties. But again, it goes back to being able to tell that story and to rally the troops and make sure that people that hold the purse strings understand that our communities need us.
The library will be closing in 5 minutes.
Sorry.
The library's closing.
I hope they don't set the alarm on me. I don't know. I feel like I have job security. I feel like everyone here has job security. I just think that we're going to really have to fight for what we need to survive moving forward. And I think a lot of it is through telling the story and creating allies and partnerships. And I don't know. I think library services are going to change coming out of this pandemic, but I don't think it has to be for the worst. I mean, I think we're going to be okay.
That's good to know. I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't mean to imply it would be for the worst, but I think that there will be I think that there are opportunities for organizational and system changes and technology changes that we maybe could have been able to take advantage of, but that now we might have the better opportunities to take advantage of them.
So Mary, do you have a 2-sentence roundup?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the future. Right now, we are working on our needs assessments and strategic plan for the next 3 years, and thinking about what we're going to do. I think libraries will always be relevant. They will always be necessary, but libraries can't just do everything themselves, and they will always need systems like us to help them and to make sure that they are ready to be as fabulous as they can possibly be for their communities. And we will continue to do that.
Okay. Well, as always, this is a great panel for learning and inspiring thought and ideas. And I hope that you enjoyed being on the panel. And our panel in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight, will be law librarians. So county law librarian, private firm librarian, and possibly a librarian who provides services at a law librarian at different levels. So always something to learn, always fun to be together on this 2-hour chat. And if you missed any of the past ones, you can find a link to the YouTube channel on the Metronet website. So it's fun. And you too can share your experience on this panel with your friends and family and coworkers once it's up on the website. It takes a few days to get it up there, but it'll happen. So thanks again. Does anybody have any last minute comments they want to make? No? None? Talked out?
I just think that we're very, very lucky to have such exciting positions. And I mean, I think most librarians, they like going to work every day. And if they don't, they recognize that and get out, you know? So I think that I can't imagine doing anything different. And I just think we're very fortunate to be in such a fulfilling industry.
I agree. Plus we get first chance at the new books. Anything else, Anne or Mary? Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. You know, I see you, but not everybody gets the experience of knowing system directors. So it's fun. I'm going to end the meeting now. And you will be, the attendees will be receiving an email with the evaluation link and some of the links that were mentioned throughout the conversation. So thanks.
Thanks, Anne.
Remember, Library Legislative Week. All right, bye.